Trifles by Susan Glaspell. Long answer questions. What impression do we get about Mr. Wright when Hale mentioned the party telephone? When Hale asked Mrs. Wright about the party telephone, she laughed and looked scared. She laughed at first because her husband had no interest in having a telephone. He was a very unsociable person. The next instant she was scared or frightened. It is because a telephone would have helped her husband to warn his neighbors of the danger he had faced from his wife. How does Hale narrate the incident of seeing the dead body of Mr. Wright? Hale had come to Mr. Wright's house to talk to him about the party telephone. When he asked his wife about her husband, she said that he was dead. Somebody had put a rope round his neck and killed him. Hale went upstairs and saw the dead body. He thought of taking the rope away, but Harry said that Mr. Wright was already dead and they would better leave everything untouched. So they went out. Mrs. Wright was still sitting on her rocking chair. Bring out the contrast in the attitude of men and women towards people and things. In this play, there is an attempt to show the difference between men and women in their attitude towards people and things. The author is a feminist and looks at things from the woman's point of view. The men characters in the play take the entire responsibility of finding out evidence. They come to the conclusion that Mrs. Wright has done the murder, but they do not find any relation between a dead canary and the murder. They also laugh at the woman when they say Mrs. Wright had not it and not killed it. Why does Mrs. Hale regret not visiting Mrs. Wright? What prevented her? Mrs. Hale finds fault with herself for keeping away from Mrs. Wright. Mrs. Wright was very pleasant when she sang in the choir, but her husband did not like her singing. She also had no contact with the neighbors. They had no children. All this made Mrs. Wright lonely. As a neighbor, it was quite essential that Miss Hale had visited her. If there was friendship between them, things would have been very different. What is the significance of the bird in the play? The dead canary is a strong evidence against Mrs. Wright in the murder case. She loved singing and bought the canary to hear its song. Her husband did not like the bird and did not like her also. It is out of his hatred to his wife and the canary that he wrung its neck and killed it. Mrs. Wright could no longer bear the cruelty of her husband. In order to take revenge, she killed him by the same method, putting a rope round his neck. How compassionate are women towards other women? Discuss. Susan Glaspell, the author of this play, is a feminist writer. She takes a view of women in the affair of life and tries to show how men are different in their views of life. Here, a woman kills her husband. The evidence against her is not easy to find out. The men who investigate do not get any clue. The women who accompany them have got the evidence, but they have a strong sympathy to the women who had committed the crime. The husband had been unkind and unfriendly. They had no children and the woman suffered from loneliness. Now her husband was dead. There was no meaning in punishing her for the crime. The officers cannot prove the case against Mrs. Wright, so the women saved Mrs. Wright by keeping her secret to themselves.